Hey guys, we are going to go over this 03 ZX7, show you as in-depth as I can to a valve adjustment. I already have, of course, the cams out, but I'm going to go over everything kind of step by step. If you've never done this before, you probably could do it fairly easy. So I have a manual printed out, of course, the 96 through 03 ZX7 manual. Because this is a lot different than the J through L, believe it or not, because this has valve buckets, shim buckets versus just the rocker arm on top of the shim. So really you need a 10 millimeter, you'll need an Allen, I think it's a 5 millimeter Allen, and basically an 8, and a flashlight really helps, and a magnet. You'll need a magnet. A set of feeler gauges. I have two, one with a band and one without a band. This one actually goes down to 0.02 millimeter versus this one only goes down to 0.6. So I got a bunch of shims because, well, my dad hoarded ZX7 parts for a long time. So I have ZX7 parts and ZX9 parts everywhere. But, so you'll always want to get the engine to top dead center. Easiest way is on the the P model is this line will line up with this little mark down here. It doesn't look like it is, but it is lined up. You want to do that. Also, there is two white dots, one on each cam, intake and exhaust cam. Basically, the white dots are here. You want to line those up. You can't really see them, but you'll know they're lined up as long as you have it on top dead center. Once you do that, you have the cam, I guess caps really is what it is, but it's one big piece. You'll have this here on top. You can't really see anything. You'll need to take that off. So there's a sequence in tightening it. So basically, if you're going to go in that order of tightening it, you should probably be okay with taking it off in that order as well, which I did. A little at a time on all the bolts instead of running, one all the way out and then going into little by little, so you don't tweak it and end up messing up these little the little holes that the I guess little collar erases, whatever you want to call them in. So that'll come off. Once that comes off, the cams basically pop up. So you can remove them. I did jump ahead because I obviously have it apart, but in the beginning you'll want to just take your valve cover off. The very beginning of this whole process. Take this off, obviously get your feeler gauges out. You'll want the cam lobes basically either facing up, kind of how this is doing, not pressing on the valve shim buckets, like this would be, because you're not going to get an accurate reading. You're going to want to get your shim out, your feeler gauges out, and start with something low, because obviously if it's too big, you'll work downwards and it'll be just pointless. Start with something low, it slides in, go to the next size up till you'll have some pressure, some resistance, not too much, not too little, and then just try the next size up. If the next size don't fit, you know that size before it just is the one. So I have all mine written down. It is kind of a lot, but this is the only way you can do it and know that you've done it right. These are the tolerances that I've had, intake side and the exhaust side. This is what they should be in range, basically 0.02 millimeter or up to 0.31. The exhaust, they were close. A lot of them were in tolerance, a lot of them weren't. The intake is really where a lot of them were out of tolerance. Actually, all of them basically were. I, just stuck my feeler gauge in there and basically found out the tolerances. This is the manual I printed off. This is where I got my clearances at. So inlet is obviously intake and exhaust is exhaust. Write those down somewhere, anywhere, because you don't want to just keep having to come back and look at that. Write them down on a piece of paper if you're going to do like this. This is literally the easiest to follow along with and make sure that you are going to do each cylinder correct and get them in tolerance, because you can write down what your clearance is, how big your shim is that you have in there, and how far you need to go up. So another tool that I didn't explain you need is a micrometer. Digital works fantastic. I love it. This is Harbor Freight in America, if you're in America. I'm sure you can probably get some pretty cheap. I mean, I think this is 30 bucks maybe. It takes a little watch battery. I like digital because my eyes aren't very good. So I'm sure that a, I guess, manual one, don't really know what to call it, would be kind of hard to read and to keep up with to make sure that nothing gets out of whack. So upon getting your clearances of each valve, you can take basically the motor down to this, like I have done. Pull off each valve bucket, shim bucket, whatever you want to call it, one at a time. There's no sense in yanking them all off at once and losing parts and not being as organized as need to be, because this is a very easy job as long as you're organized and you know a little bit about math. Not too much, but at the same time, you know, you need some knowledge about math. Take each shim out. You're going to use your micrometer and you're going to measure the shim, the thickness of it. And it's really best to write it out next to that, so you know, okay, so I have the clearance of 0.810 millimeters. I have this size of a shim. If it needs to go up 0.3 millimeters to be in tolerance, then, you know, you look at the next shim to see if you have basically a 3 millimeter shim. Because I have found that all the shims are in 5 millimeter increments. They may have some that's smaller or some bigger in between the 5. I haven't found any. I've got plenty of shims, and I haven't found not one that is in between the 0 and a 5. That's just me. You may find some, you may have some, I have no idea. But I did this because these are the shims that I've taken out of my intake side. I didn't want to lose track of them, and I didn't want to throw them with the rest of them just because I know those shims came with this motor. The bike did run. It did start up sort of kind of fine, but once it got hot, it took a little bit to start. So I knew the valves were out of tolerance a lot. So that's really about it. You're going to do a lot of math. You're going to make sure you do it one time right. As long as you do it the right time, or the first time right, you'll be fine the rest of the way. If you don't, like I did, unfortunately, this first time, I wrote my numbers backwards with the exhaust and the intake, and I had to put it all back together and remeasure a couple of them just to see which numbers go where, and eventually take it back apart. It's very simple. It's pretty quick to take apart to get this far. You should be able to get the valve cover off, missing this part, as long as your engine is tilted right and the motor mounts are adjusted correctly. You should be able to pop it off. It's kind of difficult, but it literally comes right off. Obviously, I didn't take the engine out to do mine. Once you have everything correct, everything will go back in pretty smoothly. The main part is, if you drop the chain, it's not a big deal. Get a magnet, pull it back up. But you want to make sure you have it timed correctly, top dead center. Make sure the dots are aligned. And unfortunately, you can't see the dots because obviously the frame is there. But luckily, Kawasaki put lines on the back side of the cam gears, so you can line it up that way. And also, you want to make sure that your ignition advance or your ignition rotor is pointing at top dead center on the side of the engine, because if it's not, then that would be a big pain also. That's basically it in a nutshell. I know I didn't do much work, and I just basically talked and showed you around. Probably made you dizzy with moving the camera around so much, but that's it. There's not much to show you. If I was able to mount this, I would go ahead and go through it and show you how to put it back together and everything. But it's a cell phone, and I don't have a mount for it. But basically, once you come over here, do the math on your piece of paper, and you go through your shims and pick it perfect. Okay, awesome. Place the shims in the hole first. You're not going to want to, because when you take the bucket out with a magnet, the shim is going to be stuck to the bucket, but it's only stuck there because of oil. So there is no, well, if you focus, there is no lips to hold it there. The only thing that, I'll stop moving, it'll focus. The only thing that holds it there is the oil. So you'll want to put it there first, then slide the bucket over it. Once the bucket is slid over it, that's it. Plain and simple, it's done. That's it. You'll come over here. You'll get your chain. You'll want to kind of rotate the cam to where it looks like it's not going to line up, but because of how this is, you have to kind of put it there, let it roll into place. Once it drops into place, make sure those lines are lined up, and then that's basically it. After that, you'll put your cam cap back on. Hopefully you have one of these. Hopefully you're not just going off my video. But if you don't, you can kind of pause that, take a screenshot. It goes in that order, and that is the torque specs, 104 inch-pounds. And of course, you just go in that direction. Like it says, don't get the bolts on the cam cap. Don't take them out completely. You can literally leave them in here. You can leave them in the cam cap, basically, because this bolt is different than the rest of these bolts. Of course, they're the same in the line, but they're different than all the rest of them. And then you're going to make sure that you have basically the, I don't know, dowels, washers, whatever you want to call them, in the cam cap itself, because that will align it. Ends on the head, in the can, make sure nothing gets worn out. Basically, you're going to want to keep them here. That one obviously goes there because it's missing. But you want to make sure those are in there, because if they're not, it will move and it'll mess up your cams, and you'll be doing this all over again. I think I tore the engine down to this point after getting the valve tolerances. It took about an hour and 15 minutes. I mean, if you've done this before, I've never done a P model before. I've done the J and the L, and I even did a ZX9, which is basically the same head as the J model and the L model. But I've never done a P model before. But I mean, if you've done it before, I'm sure it'll take you 45 minutes to get to this point. You take the tank off, air box, carbs, and that's it. Then you're here. So that's basically the valve adjustment in a nutshell, without actually doing the valve adjustment. So hopefully you follow along, and maybe it'll help somebody. Maybe it won't, but I try to explain everything that I have done up until this point and what I will do after. Everything is in this video, so hopefully it helps somebody out. We will talk to y'all later.